Oh, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carpo, and this video is going to be something entitled along the lines of aliens and what the hell is true. I have made probably 3,000 videos by now, and I've maybe made two or three about aliens. And, I've mentioned the idea of shapeshifters and reptilians and all these different things people talk about, but the actual idea of aliens, flesh and blood aliens from another planet, is something that I avoid because of the controversy involved. And, first off, I'd like to start by saying that I do believe in interdimensional entities. And I'm not going to go into details of what I believe because I don't know the details of what I believe. I have been to places on psychedelics that are reminiscent of what people speak of, say, when they have near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences that show that there's something outside of ourselves that is conscious, okay, and conscious of us. I'll just leave it at that. Perhaps multiple entities. The question of aliens and the ships and the UFOs is what I'm talking about here. And I want to start by saying that, back in 1997 or 8, I read a book called Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. Now, I have that book on the shelf, I think. It blew my mind. It was a big, thick book that basically, he was an ex-military guy, and he talked about all these conspiracies that the government had, all the ships that they had, the deals that they'd made with these aliens, why these things were happening. And, as a kid of, I was about 22, 21, I was just like blown away, and it changed my life. It set me on like a 20-year path of trying to understand how much of it was true and how much wasn't. And realizing along the way, especially after the internet became more available, that much of it is speculation, and it makes it very difficult to know what the truth is. William Cooper claimed that, the aliens were real, and that they had made these deals with, the government. And the other day I was watching some old videos, and I came across this Bill Cooper video. And it was one he made before he died, and he was killed actually on his property. And there's a large conspiracy about that says that, he was killed because he was revealing too much information and whatnot, because he had his own radio show. He's the guy that Alex Jones basically bid off of and took his information and made it his own. Cooper was like the OG truther from that era. And he came out on this video I watched and said that he was wrong, that he'd been lied to, that everything he thought was true, he had been misinformed through the government by trying to convince people that aliens were in charge of these ships, when in fact they were actually piloted by people, military. So I had to ask myself, so here's a guy who a lot of people give credibility to, and he's saying on one hand that these are real aliens. On the other hand, he says that no, they're not. And it's not just him. For example, there's a guy, Bob Lazar, who was known as like this he's a major UFO speaker. He still speaks at conventions. And Bob Lazar, turns out, has been proven to be a fraud. His credentials are bunk, according to many people, and he is basically a disinformant. And so the question remains, because a lot of people still believe what he says. So I saw an interview with Stanton Friedman, and anybody who knows UFOs knows Stanton Friedman. He's like one of the main UFO guys. He's kind of an old, funky look, kind of looks like a wizard or something. Anyway, he made his own little documentary about Bob Lazar being a fraud. So here's one of the top UFO researchers saying one of the other guys is a fraud. And these are just two examples. One guy telling himself that he was a fraud. He found out he was a fraud, and then the other guy saying that, somebody else is a fraud. And then there's these stories of the cattle abductions, and Bill talked about this. He says that the parts that were removed from the cows were surgically removed, and they're the lips, the anus, and parts that are used to test for radiation because they're grazing animals. And they were testing to see in areas where there may be radiation fallout from testing and whatnot. all the things he says make sense, and they make a lot more sense. It's kind of like Occam's razor, you know. The most likely story usually is true, but you can never be sure. There are some sightings that are unexplainable, but many of them could very well be our ships. Who knows? And that's why I'm making this, to say that a lot of it is just uncredible. It's led to things like people believing that the Pleiadians are communicating with them. And if you trace this back, a lot of this is from books from the 1920s through the 1940s. People wrote about these old stories. There was a new Bible. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was claimed to be, you know, the newer word, the more scientific version of Jesus, the explanation of the universe. And a lot of that has been proven to be nonsense now that we have more understanding of space. So there's just, people are continuously trying to produce these proofs of things based on old studies, such as the work of Sitchin, Zacharias Sitchin. And everybody's always quoting his work about the Anunnaki and about Nibiru and how, his translation of the Sumerian texts, which in the last 50 years have been translated properly, and found out that he was throwing in a lot of bullshit. My point here is that a lot of the people who have been since proven to be nonsense or wrong are still being quoted today as being right, and nobody seems to want to look at the information. And like everything else, what we have to do is push all the bullshit to the back of the room so we can actually figure out what's real, you know? And I could be a guy sitting here saying, oh, there's no such thing as UFOs, but I'm not. I saw one last year. And when my oldest son and I were out in the woods and we were camping up by Mount Adams, very well known for these things, and we had an experience with this light being, an entity in the sky which changed brightness as it moved like an ant exploring for food. And it moved around, and I tried to communicate mentally with it, like I said, I wish it would land, come down and land. And it got brighter, and it appeared to come towards us. And I said, wait, no, and then it stopped, and it kind of went back up, and then it went like this, and it kind of made a little curve, and then it went this way, and it stopped for a second, just sat there, and took off. Not a sound, not a helicopter. And these are the experiences that people have where anyone can say, well, it could have been anything. And you're right, it could have been. And this is the very reason why I've never talked about it. And it's like, I was talking to my son the other day. He's almost 21. And he says he doesn't talk to anybody about it because nobody believes him. They think, oh, you were just high. It could have been anything. People do see things, and there are some strange things going on. And this brings me back full circle to talking about the whole interdimensional thing, which, there are some realms that can be opened up. I believe that psychedelics tap us into that particular realm in a way that is very complicated for us to understand with our human minds, so therefore we only get glimpses and symbols. DMT is the only endogenous psychedelic within the body. It is everywhere in nature. DMT is one psychedelic that is completely set apart from all others. It doesn't put you in a spinny psychedelic, thought pattern. It puts you into a zone, a place, a land. And that land is a place where you can meet other consciousness. I believe that there are other conscious beings, but to understand them means we have to give up our idea of flesh and blood. We have to give up our idea of what we consider to be energy. And so I don't really know. I don't know what aliens are real and which aliens are fake, or whether maybe there really are reptilians. When people talk about reptilians, I just think of the reptilian mind, and the whole that primal instinct we have. But who knows? Anything's possible. I'm open to the evidence of any type of aliens. It's just that most of what I've seen thus far seems to be lacking. So I'll keep my mind open, and we'll see what we come up with. My experience has been an interesting one with that situation, with what I saw. But anyway, peace and love, everybody. Hope you all have a great day.